at that crossroad where we have to make a choice. And the heritage of making a choice lies in this ancient civilization of ours, which is more than 5,000 years. And 5,000 years of heritage has given us leadership role models from times immemorial to today. Let me just paint the vast canvas which exists before us. For almost 2,500 years and more, we have been an agrarian society. An agrarian society has given us the names of people who continue to shine in epics and mythology and folklore and folk tales, and we carry it today, who are the heroes and who are the villains. In today's times, but at that point of time, they were the leaders of that time. Came the Industrial Revolution. We are about 100 years plus in the industrialization. If you stretch it, it's a 200 years of industrialization starting out from the West, as we know formally today. Industrialization of 100 years in our country started out very small, and then it started to move forward. Industrialization, after about 75 years, brought a concept of globalization. Not that the globalization did not exist earlier. Globalization led us to issues of multicultural and diversity. Diversity has led to polarization. And polarization is leading us to start asking questions about alliances. Strategic alliances, nationally, globally. This is the phases of growth the country has grown. And leadership at each phase has been very, very different, and yet there are similar processes. Let me first talk about the differences. In the agrarian society, the head of the village, the head of the kingdom, the head of the province, they were known as to be the leaders, and they decided. And at that point of life, society and society's work all were kind of integrated. And the men ruled whatever needed to be ruled. They took the decisions which was relevant for the society. Came the industrialization, and the whole focus shifted to work organizations, where the fragmentation was between social life and work life, social living and work living. And now let me take you through 5 decades of shifts in the industrial society and therefore the leadership. You know, I have been working as a management teacher, first as a student and then as a teacher. And I was one of the few women who entered the organizations to be a faculty. At one point of time in IIM Ahmedabad, I was the only woman faculty. So when I did go as a consultant or as a faculty to do programs, there was a lot of curiosity about who this woman was. And therefore, my luck, I got to meet, even when I was a very young, upcoming faculty, all the top management because I was a curiosity. And therefore, the top management would invite me to discuss what was happening in the programs that I was conducting. And I, being a student of history, started to write down what these leaders or the big men or the leaders of the industry had in mind. So I have actually written documented data of about 40 years since I've been in the academic field, but people who were 20 years my senior who were in leadership positions. So if you take it, I'm talking about 60 years of live data. Around the 50s, I joined the IIM in the 70s. people were talking about leadership in terms of being caretakers, dreaming of making India prosperous, thinking of making India into a self-sufficient, self-sustaining, self-reliant country. And they were still talking about a social code of conduct, social code of values, seeing the organization as a family. So the roles the leadership took were of parenting, counseling, nurturing, sustaining, providing support, and identifying where the business was going and what they needed to do. So they were really the direction providers. Came the 60s and the 70s. The environment of the country had changed. And people were talking, the environment was so inviting and so beckoning for industries to grow that the first concept of visioning, that the leaders needed to have a vision. Leaders needed to formalize the organization. Leaders needed to have people who were professionally trained, began to become the language of the organization. Relationships became more formal. The focus started to be on teamwork. Focus started to be on formal structuring. People started to talk about the functional differentiation and functional interlinkages. So the whole language of leadership changed. Came the 80s and the 90s. By this time, the political system, the government had opened up the economy. And people were starting to dream becoming the global visionaries. And who had imagined in the 60s and the 70s that Indian organizations would become multinationals, that Indians would go out of the country and buy up industry, small brands buying up big brands, small organizations buying up larger organizations than themselves. This was the kind of global dreaming and the global visioning which emerged. Then came the polarization. The polarization was of race, religion, color, and gender. The more the global became closer, open, possibilities, probabilities of doing all kinds of initiatives. But at the same time, the minds became thinking of who the person was. And the whole multicultural, multidimensional, the whole 2611, you name all the events which have occurred after that. And the people started talking about what kind of, how do we manage diversity? Both in terms of Indian organizations becoming global, multinationals from abroad coming into the country, and diversity became a reality. And now we are talking about strategic alliances and partnerships. The leadership here is talking about managing multicultures, managing ambiguities, managing uncertainties, managing polarities, managing contradictions. The leadership language, the leadership challenges, and the leadership opportunities have changed. Now, this has been a broad canvas. In simultaneously parallel are family-owned organizations. Family-owned organizations over the 5 decades, and I come from an industrial family, which was only 1 generation family. 1 generation it lasted, business, simply because family did not know how to manage themselves. Families did not know how to manage relationships. Families did not know how to manage success. And my family was a successful entrepreneurial family, 3 brothers. And as long as there was struggle, they managed well. As long as when came the prosperity, they could not manage it. And I do believe that our country is also transitioning from a country of scarcity to a country of plenty. And the management of those wealth and resources and management of the values which we live by becomes very important at this point of time. Let me make 3 observations about family dynamics and family organizations. The first generation entrepreneurs, they were dreamers, and first generation entrepreneurs of 30, 40, 50 years ago. Today, it is slightly different. They worked hard, they toiled, and they were humble people saying, by chance, by fate, by destiny, we were at the right place at the right time, and the country was at the right time, and we prospered and grew. And they took the organization, the ones who were successful, took the organization to be highly, highly successful. But in those same people became larger than life. And their second generation found it very, very difficult to live up to the larger than life of the father. And my studies show that fathers, larger than life, the second generation finds it very difficult to cope with that image, because the fathers in the pressure and the opportunities and challenges of growth were only concerned about businesses, and they were not really fathers to their children. And the children found it very difficult to manage that. Another dimension which happens here is that when the entrepreneur is being successful, and there are people who are supporting him and who are with him, also grow in immense amount of power. And when the second generation comes around, there is actually a dilemma of breaking through that wall of people who have supported him to rise to the level. Though the second generation and the organization and the father knows that the son is the inheritor, but the dynamics become so difficult for the second generation. By the time the second generation is ready to take over, the third generation is ready to take over. So the second generation very rarely has a chance to really articulate or express or do something which can take him forward.